Good evening and welcome to On the Couch with Sharita. I am your host, Sharita, and it's Thursday. It's Thursday, and thank you for joining me here on a Thursday. Hindsight Media Radio 103.5 FM, where there is always something good to talk about. How's your week? How have you been? Let's take a moment to just reflect on the week, just to ease into where we are right now in the moment. How have you been? How's the week been? How's your day? How's family? How are you? Are you taking care of you? Are you eating right? Are you exercising? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you checking in with you every so often just to make sure that you're good? I know it could be tough, but the good thing about it is that you're here. That's the blessed peace, is that you're here. And we get to give God the glory. We get to say, thank you, Father, for just allowing me just to have another day. Regardless of how crazy work is, how loud kids are, how chaotic life can be sometimes. Father, I thank you because at least I have a job, and I may get up with aches and pains, but I'm able to get up. And that's okay. It's always a blessing to be on this side. So we thank him for that. We give him all the honor and glory because he has allowed us just to see another day despite it all. So you're good. You're good. And guess what? Friday is going to be even better. It's going to be a great day. The weekend's coming up. I hope you got some nice plans. Football is officially football. It's here. And so, just a lot of things going on and a lot of things happening. So just tonight, just relax and chill, and let's kind of sink into this couch and see what we got going on. I have had a pretty good week myself thus far. My clients, family. Life can be a little chaotic, but that's okay. It's all good. I'm learning how to give myself some grace in certain spaces and places in my life. And I'm just allowing myself to just be me, you know, being responsible, but just allowing myself just to be me, to have that cry, to be in that corner, because it's okay to not be okay, because we can't always be on 10. We cannot always, I don't know, it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And that's okay. We're human. And so, we do what humans do. We get in that corner. We come to the carpet and we sit and we say to ourselves, I'm not okay today. Like, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I don't feel like being a mom today. I don't feel like being a wife today. I don't feel like being a caretaker today. But, we have those moments, and that's okay. That's quite okay. So, whatever you're going through today, just let it fall off. Honor you where you are, man, woman, or child. Honor you where you are. Because life does get hard and it gets tough. And again, when you feel like crying, cry. When you're happy, you're happy. But honor you, be patient with you and be kind with you, most definitely. I definitely want to tap into an area today that I have been wanting to talk about for quite some time. And that topic, of course, you know, can be touchy. It can be hard to talk about, to digest, to peel back on. Just some things that I have come across in my sessions and my talk with my clients. And this is something that I've dealt with myself. I think everyone, of course, on the planet has dealt with this. And today I just kind of wanted to come on and give a space to kind of talk about it, to talk about how to heal, to talk about how to be empowered and encouraged at the same time. And that topic for me that I would like to talk about is grief. Grief is very hard. Grief is one of those, it's one of the most profound emotional experiences that we will face at just about any point of our lives. Whether it's a relationship, a job, a dream, a vision, losing a loved one, we're going to face grief in our life. The problem becomes when we succumb to it and we don't exactly give ourselves a chance to heal. Because no one wants to go through those feelings and emotions. No one wants to feel that. We go through it, we want to be able to get over it and just be done with it. The problem is when we take ourselves too fast through that tunnel, we end up having a setback. And it's even harder than what it was in the beginning for us. But whether you're grieving a shared loss, no matter what it is, there's death, there's miscarriage, there's job, there's a lot when it comes to grief. Healing is possible, especially if it's a shared grief. Healing is possible together. And I just want to take the time today just to expound more on what it is, what it's not, what you can do. And I want to also have this conversation with my husband, who will be joining me to even talk about grief when it comes to men and from a male perspective, because women go through grief differently. Men go through grief differently. Everybody grieves differently. And I think the important thing is that when you're going through it, and especially if you know someone that's going through it, to be able to normalize that process for them. So I just, it's been something that's been on my mind, but also too having to deal with grief when it comes to losing a client. I've had to deal with that at least twice recently. And having that shared experience with my clients who are also going through it, whether they've lost a child, a parent, you know, or something even more tangible, could be their home, could be their job. It's a walk, and it's a walk that we all face. We have to be able to understand that grief doesn't follow a straight line. It can show up in so many ways, from sadness to anger to numbness to guilt, or even unexpected bursts of joy. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but again, we all grieve differently in many different ways for many different things, you know. In dealing with a relationship, especially for couples, grief can sometimes create emotional distance. The communication is off. Um, and again, even as a couple, the way that they deal with it is going to be a little mismatched in the way that they cope with it. So I just, I kind of want to bring that to the table because I know that we all go through it and I know that we all experience it. And I wanted to share this conversation with my husband because he and I both have had our share of having to deal with grief. And it's even harder when you have a huge family with older generation that you're having to grieve. And to be, you know, also a little bit more truthful on this matter, sometimes we grieve before the loss has even happened because we know, especially with our elderly, especially with older generation, that we're having to take care of or that's in our family. You know, we're never really prepared for this. We kind of know, but it's still unexpected for us. And so just really want to be able to uh, shed some light on some things that may make your journey a little bit easier. So, you know, I kind of I kind of want to bring my husband in to just kind of share in this conversation with me, and we talk about the aspect of what this is and how we go through it together. So, again, in listening to us, if you have any questions or comments about the subject, you can always drop me a line at onthecouchwithsharita1@gmail.com. And I will be more than happy to share whatever resource that I have with you, just so, again, that your healing process can be a little bit easier. Because the thing about grief is that it never goes away, it's always there. It's how we respond to what is happening, how we allow ourselves to heal, and really how we grow around it. You know, it's always going to be there. But when we learn how to cope, when we pick up different types of coping strategies and interventions, and we tap into our own strengths or maybe lean on the strengths of others, we can definitely get through this moment. So, John, I will kind of, I guess, open this floor up for us to have a dialogue because I've gone through my grief, and I know that you've gone through yours. So, well, let me just ask you, in your moments of experiencing grief, or when was the first time in your life that you've experienced a loss? What was your first loss, and how did you handle your loss? And it could be anything, whether it was a person, a job, a friend, or whatever that looks like. What was your first loss, and how did that affect you as an individual?
Well, one of the most, I guess, memorable and significant losses that I can remember was when my father's father passed, my grandfather on my dad's side. And kind of being brought up in the old school ways of, men don't show any weakness, you don't show your emotions, you don't cry. That was the first time I saw my dad cry. I don't remember how old I was, very young. Um, But to see my dad cry was a very, very different observation on what's considered strength in a man. And back then, like I said, you were always taught that it's a weakness for a man to show any emotion. But I think having seen that brought a different perspective as I was growing up and experiencing grief of one kind or another, as to especially learning more on how to be a man and what is considered the attributes of a man. I started to learn that, and I heard a preacher say this one time: it takes more of a man to show emotion than it does for one to hide one's emotions. So that also made me decide I would put more effort in sharing my feelings and showing my feelings. One thing we're taught is you don't share your feelings, and I've come to learn that it is better for you it's not a weakness, it's not a sign of weakness. It's better for you to share your feelings. And I mean not just from, say, your spouse or sibling or relative or whatever. I mean man to man.
Right.
It's not a show of weakness to share your feelings with another guy. Another instance that stuck out with me was when my grandmother passed. There's, again, me watching my mother and how she handled it, and her trying to be strong for everybody else and not really taking the time, so I thought, to grieve herself. But within that same dynamic, soon thereafter, one of my best friend's mothers passed. And for some reason, I found myself grieving more for his mother than I did for my grandmother. And I didn't know if it was because I was releasing from what I didn't release from my grandmother, or how I felt in relation to my best friend having lost his mother.
Which is kind of interesting because when I have clients who come in and say, okay, well, yeah, my first experience was when my dad passed away. And they'll talk about their relationship with their dad. Yeah, we had a pretty good relationship. And let's just say they've suffered another loss, recently. Like his loss may have been 5-10 years ago, and now they've suffered another loss. And they would say, well, this one has impacted me a lot more for some reason than when I lost my dad. And as you're talking about it, and you're right, because we don't take the time to heal from that first loss, maybe because it becomes so traumatic and so devastating to us that when we experience the second loss, or it's the second loss, say, of a loved one, or whatever, it's almost like the leftover remnants of us not grieving the first loss. Because your relationship with your grandfather was a good relationship. It's not like you didn't have a good relationship with him. You just found yourself grieving even more because of your first experience of that first loss. And being a man, as you say, culturally, you're taught how to not share your feelings and emotions, because grief in men, yes, is often shaped by not just by personal experience, but yes, by cultural expectations. We're masculine. We're not, as men, we're taught not to share feelings, we're to be quiet, so it becomes more internalized. And I think men tend to be probably more active and busy. And then you lean into being stoic rather than actually dealing with those types of feelings and emotions. Have you yet to I don't know, and you probably don't even think about it. Go back and think about why you were more emotional for her than you were for your grandfather
Grandmother,
or your
really,
grandmother.
yeah.
Sorry.
Um, I think my feelings on that is, like I said, the fact that when the loss of my grandmother, it was kind of mimicking my mother, who was trying to be strong for the entire family, and learning from that. And I'm trying to give her an avenue so she can go ahead and grieve for herself.
Mm.
And like I said, soon thereafter, my best friend lost his mother. So maybe I didn't get a chance, like I was trying to give my mother the same chance to grieve properly,
Gotcha.
for the lack of a better word. And so when I saw the effect of that for my best friend, I grieved for him as well as myself.
Mm.
Um, Also, having grown a little wiser, you realize all that they tried to teach you and what constitutes being a man or what constitutes not being a man. Grieving, the way you grieve being one of those, you learn it's okay to grieve outwardly.
Right.
And I also wanted to be there for my best friend. So, we had a dialogue. We could talk to each other and have actual dialogue um, in regards to that, your feelings. Hey, man, I'm here for you, in
Right.
other words.
Would you say that, even as a man, and we'll get into some of those stages, but would you say that even as a man that you have healed, do you feel like anytime during this process that there was a space where you've kind of almost succumb to those feelings and emotions, even though you two have basically given each other the support that you needed because you had something to relate to? Did you find it hard to relate? Did you find it hard to allow yourself to be in this corner where, the validation, where it's okay to not be okay? Or did you still feel like, even though you were sharing your feelings and emotions, that I still have to be strong because, again, society and the cultural norm is, there's just this level of expectation that you have to be strong in this and not let your emotions be your emotions.
Well, I think it's a mixture of two. I mean, it's definitely a work in progress to, especially for men, I think, to continue to give yourself the room and the allowance to feel, to express your emotions, to talk about them. That's one of the reasons why now, the more I've learned, the more I try to pour into my son the space and um, area where he feels comfortable enough to share his emotions. And no matter how deep they may be, even if it comes to crying, it's okay to cry. Doesn't mean you're weak. Actually, I think allowing yourself to feel more of your emotions and express them actually makes you stronger, in my opinion. Now,
Mm. I can, I can get with that. The male clients that I've come across, I've pretty much have said that same sentiment. Like, again, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have these feelings and emotions, because I get met with, well, I got to be strong for my family. I got to be this and I got to be that. Well, you don't really have to be anything but in your feelings and your emotions in that moment at that time. And I think the weakness, and I agree, comes into play when you're not allowing yourself to be in that space of feeling all of these feelings. I'm not a man, but I can share and relate in the story, in this dialogue when my dad passed away and having to go back to work. And of course, you get all the questions of, what happened? Hey, we missed you, this and that and the third. And I can recall it just the moment of the anxiety of the moment of having to go back to work because I knew what was coming. And when I would get these questions, you know, I would answer. I would say, well, here's what happened or what I know, but I could not get through a sentence without breaking down. And so I just I would have to excuse myself, go to the bathroom or whatever, whatever. And it wasn't until one day, I don't know, something just clicked. And it was just, I had this self talk, with myself. And I was like, listen, if you want to get through this, if you want to be able to start your healing journey, you're going to have to talk about it. You're going to have to talk about it. You're going to have to allow yourself to go through this tunnel if you're going to get through to the other side of it. And so I didn't really have the supports like to bounce anything off of. And I think that's what makes grief a lot harder for a lot of people when you don't have that supports, because people just don't understand. They don't get why I'm upset. They don't get why I'm upset that my pet passed away or why my friend left or why, some people just, they don't understand. And so we're left to kind of deal with that alone. And that was kind of me, in a way. It was just, I didn't have the quote unquote family support physically there for me, even though my sister was in Dallas and I could call her and I could call my mom, my brother, or whatever. It was just to have someone here with you to be able to say, okay, let's walk through this thing together. Like, I've experienced that same thing that you have. Let's go through this experience together. And so I just kind of had to talk myself through it. And the questions, of course, still came, but when I found myself in that moment of breaking down, I just allowed myself to break down. I just allowed myself to be in that moment of tears and, not feeling my best. And, I allowed it to be what it was. And over time, when I would get some of those questions or when things would come up or those triggers, those triggers that reminded me of my dad's songs, especially songs that were played at his wake and at his funeral. I mean, those hard triggers, the anniversaries, all the firsts that we go through. It was just over time that I allowed myself to come face to face with those things. And in speaking of triggers, because we have to deal with the first Christmases, the anniversaries, the first Father's Day, Mother's Day, or whatever, it is, especially when you're talking about family. But all those firsts that we um, are triggered by, no matter what that is, those are the things that we have to work our way through. And what I typically tell people is, as you're on your healing journey, identify what those triggers are. What is it about January the 11th or September the 13th or, talking about Florida or New York or that food or that smell? What is it about these things that trigger you? For you, would you say in experiencing your loss or your losses, your triggers, were you able to identify your triggers? Were you even able to identify, even within that, what you want your healing journey to even look like? Because within that journey, we're going to still have the triggers. I mean, because this is the road that we're taking. So how did you deal with your journey? How did you deal with your triggers?
Well, I guess I'll kind of answer this in kind of a roundabout way because I want to share two different instances that happened. Everybody grieves differently. Everybody grieves in different lengths. Um, it may get less and less as the years go by. For some people, it may get more and more. It just happens differently. It's just how you
Mm-hmm.
handle it. One instance I wanted to share had to deal with my supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
Just a normal day at the job, and probably on the weekend because there was more than one manager there. And I walked. She was sitting in the office, thought she was doing work. She was looking at some videos, and I didn't think anything of it. Another manager walked in, I guess, and observed the same thing. Came back out and gathered the other managers for a little side conversation and said, "Hey, uh, the supervisor at the time was watching videos, I think, of her father. It just so happened that the day in question we were at work
Mm-hmm.
was the anniversary of her father's death, and she was having a kind of a tough time.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know it,
All right.
but she was having a tough time. So what one of the managers suggested was to go get her some flowers and a card and surprise her with that.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to wrap that up pretty quickly because we were in the workday,
Right.
and gathered all our resources together and gathered that to give to her.
Right.
And it helped her so much to get through the day,
Mm-hmm.
to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
Because you never know what triggers somebody.
Right.
You never know what they're going through.
Right.
But to just recognize that and show her that we care.
Right.
You're not alone.
Right.
Just loving on her.
Right.
Is a good thing.
Right.
You might not realize it, but that person does realize it. A second incident that happened was I had just lost my uncle and came back to work the next week, and a gentleman walked in the store that looked just like my uncle.
Mm.
And when I looked up at him, I just lost it.
Mm.
And when I had my little moment, I tried to explain to them, I said, "I'm sorry. You look just like my uncle. My uncle just passed." And they gathered around me and hugged me, which helped.
Right.
So you may not have control over the triggers.
Right.
But you also have to allow someone to reach out, love on you. Be accepting of that.
Right. Right. No, I totally agree. And I think that's a really strong statement to make. We may not have control of the triggers, but if we would just allow people to love on us and to gather around us, just to be that helping hand, because I've known people, to say, well, I can deal with it. I can go through it alone. I recently had a client who was like, I wanted to reach out to you, but I didn't think that what I was going through was big enough. And, I was just trying to handle it on my own. But I'm like, why though? There's no such thing as it has to be big enough or where I can't handle it or it's too small. If you need the helping hand, then allow the helping hand, because those stages of grief can be very hard, and we tend to get stuck in those stages, especially when we're triggered. Those stages of grief, when we talk about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, we'll go through the stages. When we're triggered, we may go back to being in denial or to being angry, and sometimes we get stuck in those phases and stages. We'll go all the way down to acceptance, and it could be 2-3 years later or 6 months later, and we're going back through those stages again, because again, grief is just one of those things that's just, it sticks around, but we learn how to grow around it, and the more we grow around it, the smaller it gets. I kind of want to lean into the growing around it part, because as we talk about healing and allowing people to love on us and some of the things that we could do to kind of help in our grieving journey, for me, it was talking about it. It was allowing myself to memorialize my dad, whether that was watching one of his favorite movies, which his Christmas movie is It's a Wonderful Life. And so he loved that movie. You know, teaching our kids how to go fishing. They like to fish. That was one of the things that he liked, to do. For my wedding, I did not wear any shoes. I know that's, kind of like, what? No shoes? My wedding was incomplete because he wasn't there. So that was just a way for me to honor him and memorialize him. There are people who will do a balloon release, if it's a favorite place that person liked to go, or favorite meal that they like to eat. I mean, they would indulge in that. But that's again part of our healing journey. And let me just, and even we have to be careful how we put ourselves in a space where we deny ourselves the help and the support, because again it locks us into these stages that we pass through. We're going to pass through them anyway, but when we deny ourselves the ability to get the support and the love and the help that we need, we kind of get locked into those stages. I mean, we can get out of them, but it just, I think it makes the journey, a little bit harder. You know, John, for you, again, as a male, I mean, you've tapped into many other resources, because I know you, and you've suffered not just the loss of people, but there have been other losses in your life, that you've had to endure. What other losses, other than people, loved ones, that you've had to endure in your life?
Um, one big one was the loss of a job. My very first experience with losing a job hit me real hard.
Mm.
Um, because up until that point, I succeeded in my mind in being this dependable person who gave his all, and um, no matter what situation, no matter what job I was doing, I would pride myself on always being able to get through it, to go from
Mm-hmm.
level to level, job to job, not job hopping per se, but just whatever I put my hands on, I would see it through to completion. And this was after college, and I had gotten a job back at the university I graduated from and worked there for 4 years. I had been through three different mentors, if you say,
Mm-hmm.
and on the third one, he was kind of stricter than I was, I guess, used to. And as far as expectations, I think his expectations were a little higher than the previous two. But to be in that situation where every year I would have a different mentor meant I was not being continually trained or directed
Mm-hmm.
in the most consistent of manners. So under the third one, it was like, certain deadlines weren't met, then it was strictly my fault. There was no way it could be any outside source, or um, um, the allowance to maybe see that, hey, he wasn't brought up like the rest of the other programmers. I was a
Mm-hmm.
programmer. So him needing assistance is not solely his fault, but because of his training or lack thereof. So at a particular point, the third person I was under was like, man, you've been here X amount of years and you have not you're only under one particular um, handling only one part when other programs are handling multiple parts.
All right.
And even though I tried to explain, well, I wasn't kind of set up for success like those other ones were, he didn't take that into consideration.
Right.
So then,
Now, did you find yourself at this point, because you're getting to a point to where they're starting to come down on you? Do you, for yourself, did you start grieving your job? You haven't lost a job yet, but do you think that you started getting into this process where you started grieving certain aspects of your job or the position, or, I mean, because we tend to do that when we know maybe something's coming down the pike or whatever that looks like. So, would you say that you kind of started grieving? Maybe of course it becomes stressful, but do you think you started in your grieving moment at this point?
I don't necessarily think at that particular point it was about grieving, more so than, and you can tell me if this is in a relation, becoming anxious, and starting to develop this anxiety about, will I be able to finish this? The pressures from not finishing that within a certain time frame.
Right.
Why is this coming down on me so heavily, more so than any other person in there, when I've had a different setup for success than they have?
Right.
And why can't this gentleman see that? As time went on and I guess things were getting more critical, is when I was informed that I was put on probation. So I asked for the opportunity to bring, because at first the probationary period was such that X amount of time means if you haven't come up to speed on this, then we'll have to let you go. Well, can you extend? I wrote a long letter and said in my defense, and explained how I was not allowed to kind of mature like the other programmers. Can I be given ample more time to try to bring myself up to that speed? Of course, with whatever help and resources I needed.
Right.
And they allowed it, but in the end, it just didn't meet the criteria that gentleman thought it should meet.
Right.
So it was very stressful going to work every day within that probationary period.
Right. I can only imagine, because now you're looking at being let go, which at some point that happens. Yeah. So you're grieving the loss of a job, not to mention your dream and your vision for your career. It's kind of like, okay, now I have this ball with all this stuff, and I have my job, I have my dream, my vision, and and what we don't tend to realize too, that was mixed up in there, which, I mean, you didn't mention, but this lost sense of self, because now you're having to grieve, am I not good enough? Am I not, my work skills, like I went to school for this stuff, and, it's all coming down, on me. And I have kind of watched you go through, even as we talk and have this conversation, we've had this conversation before, but how that kind of weighs on you. I definitely want us to be able to have a conversation when it comes to men and mental health, because I think that's an important part of it too. And getting the help that you need, because again, it's when you go back and you talk about the masculinity in men and what that means, to be a male and showing feelings and emotions, it's hard for men to reach out for help and to reach out for that support, especially if you build yourself up to the standard that, hey, here's my dream, my vision, what I'm going to do, and that all kind of comes crashing down. That doesn't necessarily sit well with your spirit, Yeah. And so now this thing has happened, and so it's being able to find ways to cope, like you've talked about before. You've gone through it where you've had to, you've talked about it, maybe try to get help for it, just finding different ways to kind of heal from it. The thing about grief is that it doesn't care about your gender, because we all go through it. Everybody in society goes through it. Everybody in society has to deal with it in some shape, form, or fashion. But the important thing is that you explore uh, some good coping strategies so that you can heal and be the best person that you can be for yourself, and even for you as a man, for your family. I mean, having, a son, and teaching him that it's okay to have those feelings, and emotions, is a pretty big deal. Um, so yeah, yeah.
So one thing you definitely have um to help bring yourself out of it.
Mm,
There's a lot of prayer went into it. Um, allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to reach out for help. Definitely get back on the right track, get back on the horse. Don't stay down. Don't beat yourself down. Don't
right.
allow this whole thing to beat you down. Um, but um, not not allowing yourself to feel like a failure just because one thing. It might have been a big thing to you, yes, but this one thing shouldn't define who you are and what you're capable of and success you can have.
Right.
Which is something I definitely want to show so that my son can emulate.
Right.
Make sure he doesn't succumb to the weight of maybe not being able to complete something or do something or finish something that doesn't make you a failure.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. Well, one thing that I did want to ask you about, and to give you a chance to just to kind of talk about it and expound on it, because I'm sure some people who can relate to this and sit in the seat that you sit in. So, I want to give you this chance and this opportunity, because I don't think I've given you that, as of late, because of something that has taken place. But your Cowboys, I want to give you this floor. I want to give you this time to mourn. I want to give you this time.
Really
all these Cowboy fans out here.
Grief and loss.
To give you
with the Cowboys.
That is grief. That is loss. You deserve to talk about it.
Unlike some people maybe with their teams, I am deeply rooted. I'm not a fair weather fan. I've been a Cowboys fan for as long as I can remember, since I could throw a football. Probably the only Cowboy fan in the household. Going back to the glory days with Roger Staubach and Tony Dorsett and Drew Pearson and Tony Hill, all those greats. I've always been a Cowboy fan, win or lose. Win or lose. Life is a cycle.
It's a cycle.
There are going to be times when
it's
you're up. There will be times when you're down. There's going to be times when your team is up. There's going to be times when your teams are down. So it's just about, you don't give up on yourself or the things that you believe in. Just because it might be a rough time patch right now, don't mean it won't get better.
I think they've had rough patches.
So have other teams. So have other teams. Trust and believe.
They've had rough patches. I mean, are they ever going to come out of the rough patch? Last Super Bowl. What year was that?
29.
That's been a long time.
Yes.
I'm gonna need them to do something a little bit different this year.
Well, a lot of teams cannot boast that they have multiple Super Bowl rings. Okay.
Okay.
So, like I said, life is a cycle. Just ride it out, and
I think they, I'm gonna need them to come off the cycle and do something a little bit different. But I'm just saying. But no, I appreciate you being able to sit here with me and have this conversation with me and talking about grief and the journey, because it's you know, again, it's something that we all go through. Again, like you said, whether it's a team, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, a vision, or whatever that is. I mean, we all have gone through it. You know, the thing to remember is that grief is a journey, and one that doesn't follow a map, like it doesn't keep a schedule, it doesn't always make sense. It's not a problem that can be solved, but it's a path to be walked. And, you know, while the terrain may be rough or whatever, it's also rich with meaning, memory, and transition. So just, we just have to go through the journey. We just have to go through the walk and just allow ourselves to just, be present, honor us where we are in the journey, and, understand and know that help is out there. And if you or someone is going through grief, check in with people, get them the help that they need, and be patient with them. Be patient with yourself. Never be afraid to reach out. And again, if you have any questions, you need resources or whatever, please feel free to reach out, to me on the couch with Sharita1@gmail.com. That's on the couch with Sharita1@gmail.com. I would like to thank my husband for taking his time to come in and talk to me. I know you got another game that you want to get to, but I appreciate you really just taking the time to share your experience as a man in this journey, because I think it's so important for other men to hear that help is out there, and that it's okay to always, reach out if you need anything. But listen, thank you guys so much for taking the time to stop by the couch and, indulge in this conversation, this dialogue that we had. And remember, I'm here every Thursday at 7, Hindsight Media Radio, 103.5 FM, where there is always something good to talk about. You guys stay easy, stay blessed, and I will see you soon.